Okay, thank you so much. Good morning. Today, Legalise Cannabis Victoria will be moving in Parliament to establish an inquiry into workplace drug testing, focusing particularly on the question of medicinal cannabis patients. We understand that every year hundreds and possibly thousands of medicinal cannabis patients who are unimpaired and who are using a legally prescribed medicine are subject to harassment, discrimination and often dismissal. This is an issue that needs to be investigated, and the purpose of the inquiry will be to explore the scope of the problem and come up with appropriate and responsible measures that will resolve these issues to the benefit of all parties. We'll take questions.
What are some of the industries where this is happening?
Look, we've been inundated with correspondence from people who have been affected, and it is quite clear that this spans the public sector, the private sector, NGOs. It's in blue-collar work, grey-collar work, white-collar work. And so in that sense, we really need to have this inquiry in part just to try and establish the extent and the scope of the problem.
What are you expecting the inquiry to show?
We expect it will show that medicinal cannabis is expanding in its use exponentially, that this is a really positive thing, but the laws and the regulations that control workplaces are way out of date and they need to catch up with contemporary workplaces.
Are people able to provide their prescription in order to sort of bypass that discrimination, or are they being discriminated against anyway?
No, I mean, one of the really big issues is that in many cases there is no defence that is available to people, and a simple fact of chemistry is that what we find is that for a typical user, let's say, they will have a period of impairment of 2 to 4 hours, but testing will detect that episode for 14 to 30 days later. And the net result is that people are being sacked or discriminated against, often with medications that they've taken weeks before.
And what we're also finding is that medicinal cannabis patients are disclosing that they're patients, testing negative on their workplace drug test, yet still having the same repercussion as if they tested positive. So even that disclosure is causing discrimination.
Is there any way of telling the difference between whether they're in the 2 to 4 hour window or whether they're in like the 20-hour window? Just because if there is still that window of impairment, how do you make sure that they're not working in that time?
The science of measuring impairment is very problematic. Okay, I think that's quite clear. That said, I don't think we can wait for a scientific resolution of this problem. What we need to look to is the relationship between the patient and their doctor, the patient and their pharmacist, and just as with an opioid or a benzodiazepine, people work to the best advice from their practitioner and they work safely accordingly.
Are they saying how many Victorians are being reprimanded or are losing their jobs or facing some kind of HR action because of this?
No, but we would certainly hope that the inquiry will tease that out. We've had hundreds and hundreds of people who have written to us about both workplace drug testing and roadside drug testing, and the fact of the matter is that I suspect we're seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Where are talks at with the government in regards to that exemption for medicinal cannabis users driving? Obviously you had that bill earlier in the year with an undertaking from the government that would look at it.
Look, on the question of random drug testing and the right of medicinal cannabis users to drive their vehicles safely, we would have to say that we have been working with the government now for close to 6 months. We believe we are very close to making an announcement on those next steps, but we're not in a position to make that announcement today. What we do want to focus, though, on is the fact that with medicinal cannabis, there are multiple aspects to this problem. Medicinal cannabis driving is one, workplace drug testing is another. We intend to leave no stone unturned.
Do you know where Victoria
Victoria stacks up in the amount of medicinal cannabis users compared to the rest of the country.
Do you want to talk about sex, Betty?
We know that there's roughly about 4,000 new patients issued a script each month via the TGA reporting. We also know that medicinal cannabis, since it has been legalised, there has been over 1.1 million scripts issued, and of that, about 65% of those scripts are for pain management alone. Now, we have to remember when a patient goes in for a medicinal cannabis prescription, they have to provide evidence that they have tried every other pain medication. So this is the last port of call for patients, and what we're finding is that people are finally having their agency back. This is a medication that is working for them, and yet it is treated differently to other medications that they've consumed prior to.